Greta Thunberg's latest act of defiance, uh, I think plays a role in the moral and political drama playing out in the Mediterranean, one which strikes at the heart of international law, civil resistance, and the limits of state power. The British-flagged yacht Madeleine, operated by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, was boarded by Israeli forces in international waters last night. Aboard were 12 activists from across the world, including the Swedish climate campaigner Greta Thunberg and the French-Palestinian MEP Rima Hassan. Their aim to deliver symbolic humanitarian aid, baby formula, rice and powdered milk to break the naval blockade of Gaza. They didn't make it, of course. The boat was intercepted, communications were jammed, Israeli speedboats swarmed, chemicals reportedly were dropped, and at 2 a.m. the Madeleine was commandeered and diverted to the Israeli port of Ashdod. This was not a ship of fools nor a selfie yacht, as the Israeli Foreign Ministry rather pettily claimed. This was a carefully calibrated act of protest, an expression of international solidarity with a besieged people and a condemnation of a blockade that has choked Gaza since 2007. Greta Thunberg, whose activism has taken her from the Arctic to the steps of the United Nations, pre-recorded a message. "If you're watching this," she said, "I've been intercepted and kidnapped by forces that support Israel. Arrested not for violence, not for espionage, but for sailing with a conscience." In retaliation, the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has instructed that the activists, Greta among them, be shown footage of the 7th of October Hamas attacks in what appears to be a grotesque attempt at re-education. He accused Thunberg and her colleagues of supporting Hamas, a slur both inaccurate and intellectually dishonest. They aren't apologists for terrorism. They are dissenters, witnesses, moral agitators. And it's perfectly possible to recognize the atrocity of the Hamas attack on October the 7th and still disapprove of the Netanyahu spearheaded blockade of Gaza and the mass attacks, the attacks on civilians in Gaza, which seem to be spearheaded by revenge rather than by necessity. And while Israel insists that the blockade is necessary to stop the flow of arms, international legal opinion is far more divided. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur in the occupied Palestinian territories, has denounced Israel's seizure as a flagrant violation of international law and called on every Mediterranean port to send its own flotilla. United, she wrote, they will be unstoppable. Because of this is not just a story about one boat, it's a story about who gets to control the narrative. The Israeli authorities handed out sandwiches and water, took photos of Greta in a life jacket and declared the show is over. But if it is a show, it's the one that reveals Israel's deep anxiety that its actions in Gaza, with more than 54,000 dead according to the Hamas-run health ministry, and famine threatening over 2 million people, are not merely military operations, but the slow motion of erosion of a people's future. The Freedom Flotilla's symbolic cargo was never going to change that, but it did reveal something else, that civilians are willing to risk interception, even arrest, to draw the world's attention to that reality. And what of the charge of provocation? Of course it was a provocation. So was Rosa Parks. So was Gandhi's Salt March. So were the Danish boats that carried Jews to Sweden in 1943. The point of civil disobedience is not to be convenient, it's to expose injustice by confronting it. It's also worth noting that what wasn't intercepted, drones, missiles, bombs, continue to cross borders and airspace with impunity. But powdered milk, that must be stopped. In that contradiction lies the absurdity and the tragedy of a militarized conscience. Israel says Greta Thunberg and others will be deported and the aid delivered through real humanitarian channels, yet those channels have become killing fields. Aid convoys have been shelled, Palestinians shot while queuing for flour. Even the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, backed by Israel and the United States, has been described as a drop in the ocean. In a world where celebrities usually trade their influence for brand endorsements or reality shows, Greta chose to board a boat with no guarantee of arrival. And the question for all of us is, not just what happens next to her or to her flotilla, but what this says about us. Do we applaud young people taking risks for justice, or do we, as Israel seems to, try to re-educate them into submission? This isn't the end of the Madeleine. It's not even the end of the blockade. It's the beginning, perhaps, of a broader reckoning. And Greta Thunberg has reminded us, not for the first time, that silence, too, is a choice. And in the Mediterranean this week, some chose not to speak.